Hello, everybody, and welcome to BAInsights. I'm really pleased today to have three further wonderful guests to talk about business analysis and GenAI and AI, or artificial intelligence, for those not familiar with the AI term. So without further ado, if I can ask my guests to start to introduce themselves, starting with yourself, please, Bronia.
Hi, I'm Bronia Anderson-Kelly. I work as a consultant business analyst out of the Isle of Man in the offshore financial sector. I largely work on, obviously, change projects, being a BA, around finance. I've only really dabbled in AI in terms of personally, but I use it more extensively myself, but I've reviewed a couple of the BCS's AI books that they've issued within the last year or two.
Okay, thank you very much, Bronia. We'll remember to catch up on ask you about the BCS books later, for sure. Thank you. And Tammy?
Yes, I'm Tammy Kennedy. I work at BT in the digital department, mostly in their Omni service area, and look after the BA practice across the whole of engineering. So I've been here coming up 8 years now. So I've seen a lot of change, and I think AI is the next step in that. So I'm quite excited to see where that goes.
Thank you very much, Tammy. And Jason.
Everyone, Jason Gibbs. So I'm a senior consultant, BA, essentially for a consultancy firm based in the Channel Islands, Guernsey. Been here for about 6 years now, delivering BA services to clients across multiple sectors. I think in the past sort of 12 months, I've had a keen eye and a particular interest in generative AI, and quite hyper aware of the impact it has the potential to have on clients and our role. So really looking forward to the chat today.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. And thank you all again for introducing yourselves. I mean, definitely, as you said, Jason, this is a hot topic that I hear loads about. So I thought, what better time than have a conversation about it? So perhaps we can start with a question in terms of how your view on how might GenAI or AI impact the way that a business analyst approaches their deliverables and their work or their role, or even their skill set. And if I can ask Bronia that question first, please.
Yeah, I suppose it's twofold, isn't it, really? Because there's AI being introduced into the company that we're working for, and how we as BAs adapt to that and having that within our projects. But then there's also, how are we using AI within our work? So there's kind of two elements, isn't there, that it could impact. There might be more. Hey, the rest of you can throw some more things in, but that's kind of the two that I see. And I think in terms of impacting into our roles and how we use it, I think that in the short term, at least, we'll find that it just allows us to free up our time for other stuff. So basically, we become more efficient at doing certain activities. And in the short term, there'll be a smaller set of those, and it'll gradually grow out as we get more technology and that there's more platforms, and AI is expanded into other areas. But it'll allow us to kind of focus on other elements, like strategic elements, creative elements, that sort of thing. And then the other aspect, it's more around kind of the considerations that we might need to have as we integrate AI into our projects, or delivering AI functionality within any projects or BAU that we might work on. I think they're probably the two main things.
Yeah, it's definitely two interesting angles to think about, and it feels like the two that I've been thinking about most anyway. That's for sure. Yeah.
I think for me, as you've just said, Bronia, so the internal, external, that's how conceptually I'm seeing this as the internal. How can this help me deliver value in my role as a BA? But I'm also very cognizant of this external emerging product almost around implementation of generative AI or AI type projects. I don't know if I'm right in this, but what I think us in this business started to see that actually it's just a tech delivery, and it's more about being AI literate and being able to understand the AI technology, but actually it still just needs BA, PM, change management, all the sort of consultancy type service lines. But it's just being literate, being able to speak that language for the client and help guide them through what I think is quite a noisy landscape at the moment, which is AI.
So do you
But
do
yeah,
you see it, Jason, as just another type of tech that we can kind of treat the same as we have with other techs, or do you like feel that it differs in some way, or that we have to do anything different because we're talking about AI rather than any other technology that we might have come across before?
I think it is just another type of tech. That's that's the emerging thought for me at the moment. And I think, like other tech, it needs data, it needs implementation, it needs to follow the business change life cycle. All of those rules still apply. What's different about this, I think, specifically with generative AI, is it's democratizing the tech language. So a lot of users and clients are able to get their hands on this tech and experiment it with it, where they're not with other areas. So I think that's what a lot of this demand's coming from, in this discussion around this specific topic. But I do think it's about understanding this as a piece of tech, but then still, yeah, applying the same BA tools. That's what I'm seeing initially, at least. I guess as it gets more complex, there's a risk that it becomes very technical, more tech heavy. But I think initially, yeah, that's how I'm seeing it.
And I think if I look at it from the other side of what you mentioned, Bronia, as well, is as BAs, how can we use it to add value to our role? I think there's definitely, I mean, obviously the main one when it first came out was BAs will be replaced by AI. And I think that was a very sweeping statement. And I think we're a long way from that. Where I think, like you said, it will help is some of those sort of it sounds off, but the menial side of what we do, once we've gathered all that information, summarizing it, I think AI is going to be fantastic as a tool to do that and to help people bring together all the thoughts and all the scribbles that we all put down everywhere and bring it together. But I think the thing to watch as well is for new people coming into the discipline, is they're relying on a tool to do that for them. The people who've been doing that for a long time, that's kind of how we learn some of our craft and become really good BAs. So it's something to watch, is how we balance that. And yes, it is a tool, but we should, like any other tool, be able to survive without it. So what can we as sort of more senior people in the discipline do to help those coming into it to not just rely on a tool and use what they know and what, the other tools that we have in our toolkit to be able to do that. And I think that's just one of the things to maybe balance and think about.
And that point on the tools, I think is definitely a valid one, because I think certainly from what I've used it, I've noticed that, as with similar tools in the past, that you learn how to use and adapt the tool and how to behave in a slightly different way. So whereas we might conventionally ask a question of each other in a certain way, or expect a delivery in a certain format, actually there's loads of powerful benefits we can get from using GenAI as an example. But they won't always be exactly in the format we might have historically expect to see our outputs. So, for example, an obvious example to me is that, yes, it would be nice to be able to plug something in and get this perfectly defined, perfectly accurate business process. Obviously, that's not going to happen, all right? Or it doesn't happen in exactly the form we might want it to, which is probably handy. But being able to distill some information into what could be a set of viable high-level processes can at least give us that transparency of what to look into next, as an example.
Yeah, so like a template and framework to then add those extra complexities to.
That's right. Yeah.
I think it does a good job at taking you from 0% to 80%, but it requires that extra 20%. The BA rule still applies. It's as if you've gone into a requirements workshop, elicited a load of information from stakeholders. You then apply that BA lens to actually aggregate, analyze, and extract the meaningful, input or output. And I think it's the same with this. What I'm seeing is when you're using ChatGPT or other LLMs, you can put stuff in, but don't expect 100%, or if you don't get 100%, don't think it's not working. The value is going from 0 to 80%. That ideation, converting your notes into a nearly there output. I think that's where a lot of the value is. Incorporating that into your sort of daily role.
I would agree.
But not to rely on it. Because I think one of the things we're seeing when you do use it, and I know I mentioned it first, but to summarize things, is it then goes and adds things of its own that maybe weren't in your findings. So if you're not careful and just like sort of do that, let it summarize and send it straight on without review, especially right now while it's in its, relative junior and infancy, it suddenly has some very random things that it adds. So if we're not careful and you just send that on, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, that wasn't meant to be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. I think it definitely needs that. There's a big human intervention step still required to validate, as you would with a workshop. You collate all this information. You don't send that straight on. You sit down, go through it. That's duplicated. That's not relevant. That's out of scope. And you refine it. I think the same does
I use
apply.
it quite a bit as kind of an aid memoir. Let's go with, so if say I'm creating like a new document type or something like that, maybe the specific client I've gone to don't have that already defined, a solution document or something that's not really in their path, but it seems sensible in this case. You kind of go, okay, what do I want to put in there? And you can, of course, sit down and brainstorm all the contents and think about what you have, or you can go, what should I have in there? Give me all the breakdown. What should I contain? And you can then, as you say, curate that, pick and choose what's relevant, what's not. I think asking supplemental questions like, are you sure there's no more? Or if I was going to be really impressive, what else would I put in? Stuff like that is really useful because you find an extra few things that you might otherwise not have thought of. But I've used that, and I can say now that it would A, have taken me ages, and B, I would have missed stuff. There is no doubt. I know you say about relying on it, but it's either that or going onto the internet, and we do that. We do that now. We rely on that now. And AI will become eventually similar to that, in that we'll rely, just like we rely on lights in the house to move around. It's going to progress that way. One of the other things though around impacts, again, John, to our role there, is we did touch on just impact of what we do and impact on a project, but the internal impact is also other people that we're working with using AI. So, for example, it'll become more common. I already know individuals who do, but it'll become more common for developers to work with an AI assistant when developing their code. Now, we may well in the future, or even for some people now, see a problem statement. At the moment, we mostly, if AI is being used, it's, I want to write some code that does exactly this in English, and you then get an output. But it might be in the future that we go from problem statement rather than solution design straight to code. But in the future, if we're going from problem statement to code, our role as a BA might be, rather than working with our SMEs to look at what's the possible solutions, which one's best, it might more be, what's AI suggesting is the solution? How apt is that? What is the gap analysis on that piece of work versus where we're going to? So we might actually even see a shift in kind of working backwards. And that's just an example. So that could happen with our SMEs and them defining what it is that they want. They might actually go, I'm not going to use what I know from the business. I'm going to use what the world knows and use AI and determine requirements that way. And we might see a shift in that too. So there is all sorts of potential impacts. So it might slightly change the way, how we're involved.
That point you made as well about, sorry, Jason, the point you made about brainstorming, I think is really, really interesting one. I've certainly seen that myself recently, in that whereas ordinarily it's always beneficial to bring the team together to bat around and talk about a few ideas, if nothing else, to just make sure, get your own creative juices going to think about things. And obviously it's not always practical or the right thing for the wider team to bring them together to help you get started. So this is almost like that surrogate team to bat ideas around with. That, to Jason's point previously, it may well take you 80% of the way. But even like regular brainstorming, it might take you nowhere in the direction of where you wanted to go, but even give you just something you can rip apart and use as the basis for the creativity you actually need. Sorry, Jason, I interrupted you there.
Bronia, that's a really interesting concept, what I think we've just described, and that really aligns with what I'm seeing, that less solution focused and more problem defining focused, and I do think it will support that, and it will start to potentially absorb the tools that we do to define the solution, And actually, rather than the requirements gathering or the solution definition, we actually start becoming masters at asking the question, defining the problem. And that's a really interesting concept. I'd not actually looked at it that way, but that for me would make a lot of sense, because I think it's going to get better at that. It's going to get better at saying, oh, this looks like that. This is probably what you're looking at as a solution. But even with how you use it today, what you'll quickly find the more you use it, it's all about how well you define the question. That will deliver a quality output.
I found as well recently that we don't always have to rely on picking the perfect question to get the information out. If it takes us 7 or 8 questions, in worst case, to get the answer we need, a really good prompt I've found to use is actually, what would have been a better question for me to have asked to get this outcome? And actually, the tool itself, GBT, if I use that as an example, will actually replace what I've used in 3 or 4 prompts, or even 8 worst case, into a single statement, which actually allows me to learn maybe a better way to interact with the tool in future, or to ask a question in a slightly different way.
Yeah, specifics on chatbots. I think asking it to ask you questions in order to help define its answer. So, you give it, I'm trying to write a business case, and I'm trying to find out whether X is better than Y. Ask me up to 10 questions so that you can help me determine if that is the case, which is better. And let it come up with questions. And it's a little bit of a process. Can you go back and suppose you had a conversation with it? But the difference is crazy. And same, for example, if you go completely off business analysis here, but if you were to go, I'm trying to create a marketing strategy, ask me 10 questions about the business that I'm working in and what I'm trying, my goals that I have, etc., in order for you to define a marketing strategy. You don't then need to be going, I work in this area and I do this, and this is what I'm trying to do, and this is my target audience, this is who I am. It asks you those things, and you're not writing full sentences, you're just answering those questions as they come up. It's actually that is a more efficient way. We're going off piece a little bit there, but it's worth having a go at that.
Really, I was hoping these sort of examples would come out, I'm sure, as they are, useful questions and different ways of asking the tooling to help guide us on how better to interact with it.
And what we're describing here is this new role that's starting to emerge now, which is prompt engineer. That is this role of working with the LLM or ChatGPT, for example, to craft the perfect question for an organization to deliver a repeated outcome or goal. And there's people that I think are getting paid within big organizations at the moment to develop those questions to a crazy level of detail to produce a very specific output.
Perhaps what we're uncovering here is it's another stakeholder that the BA is perfectly positioned to sort of learn how to interact with, as we generally learn how to interact with different stakeholders already. Ask it the right questions.
Have you come across the news item? It was a month, maybe a little bit more ago now, where there was a report of the analysis that had been done on a number of chatbots, I think, where people were saying, take a deep breath at the start and then asking the question. And the outcome that they were getting was a significant percentage more accurate and well-crafted, let's say. Don't know what the measures were. It was a headline report. But basically, if you were asking the chatbot to take it slower, it responds in a similar way, and they don't really know why. It responds in a similar way as a human would do. I've started sometimes, when it's important to me, putting, this is a really important thing for you to carefully answer. Sounds ridiculous, but the outcome that you get on those can vary as well. So if you've got something where you're just trying to, I just want to be creative, crack on, you can do that. But if you really want to crack, if it's really important thing, you're writing something important as part of a business case for a summary that's going to board level or something like that, and you really want it to be succinct and what have you, you can, be really specific in that. But also you can ask your chatbot to be really careful because this is very important to my career or whatever,
It makes sense. I think using please and thank you as well, just in case when it eventually takes over the world, it'll remember you as one of the polite humans. Nice. Yeah.
One of the ones that wasn't mean to it.
Yeah, that's it, right? I'm always very kind to it when I'm interacting with it.
I think it says one of those. It's nice to hear actually, Jason, because I do sometimes find myself putting please in there just out of just habit, and I think, well, maybe it's not a bad thing. And I think you've probably just demonstrated we should just all continue as we use our P's and Q's when using the tool. Maybe drive down manners.
I say thank you to the cash machine sometimes, just out of habit. I don't know what it is. Very polite.
I do it with like Alexas and stuff around the house.
Yeah.
If I'm actually quite often in the morning getting ready, and I was like, "Oh, Alexa, how long will it take me to get to work, please?" And she says, "Oh, that's great, thank you." I thought she's not even heard the last bit, but it's habit. I think just how you interact, and I think we will treat them more like people. The more that we interact with them, and that thing will become the norm.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how many people actually do type, "Oh, thanks," or.
I used to. I do it less now. There was something about number of tokens, etc., and I've minimized it a bit. But yeah, I did used to.
Yeah, I do like the point you'd made there about saying, actually, this one, please, can you be a little bit more considered with this?
Yeah,
I've not thought to do that, and I think that's a really interesting take on it. It's like, I'm not just wanting a quick, please give me a quick structure that I can hack around with, and which I think is probably at the moment a lot of people's usage of it. Give me a start for 10, so I'm just going to go ask ChatGPT and then I'll tweak it. Actually say, no, I'm serious here.
And
I want you to be considered in your response.
And comparing the different chatbots as well and how they respond, because there is actually quite a big difference. When I was reviewing one of the books and for the BCS is on chatbots and how to get started with it, and so in there the author used a few different examples and showed the responses, and so which chatbot you end up using the most, you might find is based on the types of responses you get. Some of them are a lot more wordy and offer more as well. So you might ask a question, what's the population of such a place? Which isn't a great question to ask them, but just to give you an idea, what's the population of such a place? You'll get an answer, and then you might get some other blurb of extra information. And some people would really like that, and that's how they like to interact, and they find out some more information, or it's a bit more wordy and it feels a bit more real or whatever. But some people just want the answer, and I want you to
want the answer. Yeah, I don't want all your fluff.
Yeah, and then equally there's the difference in creativity levels. So on Copilot, you get an option with different creativity levels, and there's like 3 options you can choose, and I think the middle one's balance, there's one creative, and that changes the kind of style of response. Whereas with ChatGPT, you do that through your prompt, and say, I want you to act as a creative director for whatever, and blah blah blah, and then you can kind of tailor it that way. And you can instruct it to be more, to give you more, as much information as you think I might find useful beyond what I've asked you, blah, blah. You can do lots of other stuff like that, and that's kind of quite useful. But I think if you're like a BA, I know we're coming on to this maybe, but if you're a BA getting started, having a go at the different chatbots and working out which one kind of do you like the answers of, that you find gives you the most, and also sometimes that doesn't just give you rubbish and it's accurate, and that just might be the way that you ask questions as well. But like you'll find one that you prefer, and they do change over time, of course, but you'll probably find one that you prefer.
There's a term for, it's called a temperature. I think that's what it's called in ChatGPT, all these LLMs, and they turn up and down the temperature, and I think the higher it is, the more fluff it gives you around the answer. The lower it is, the more it will go.
It's like 10 cold, factual.
Exactly. Answer. Yeah, exactly. How it's how human like. Yeah.
I think, as we think about how people are new to business analysis as well might use the tool, I think it's provides a different opportunity for those individuals to maybe test out new tools, as Bronia was talking about, find different ways to interact with a tool, but also use that as a way to prepare for when they're interacting with individuals, where you have to ask different questions in a different way as well. I've certainly found it useful just being able to use some of the content to almost put as my back pocket items that I know giving me a bit of some insight, or at least some silly questions that I might want to ask to tease out the right answers or the right perspectives from stakeholders. That just means I'm a little bit more informed with some of my early questions and my early investigation.
And we've talked here as well, mostly about language, haven't we? We've talked about the LLMs, but of course there's generative AI for more than that. And I think a lot of us are starting to use, DALL-E is OpenAI's, and maybe like Leonardo or Midjourney to create kind of pictures. And some of that feels a little bit less, well, how could I make that work in a BA world, or how do I use that? And sure, I've used maybe some generated pictures to go on like meeting invites or something cute like that. But largely not, but that's not, that it already exists. So even things like text to process maps, or later voice to process maps, or whole conversation summarized and into a process map, that's where we're kind of heading. And that's absolutely not mainstream at the moment, but there is already applications and functionality that exist. There's like Chart AI, Diagram GPT, Whimsical. There's like a few different things that are out there in the market, and I don't use them at present because there's so many AI things that we can use. But I don't use them at present, and some of them have strengths in other areas, but largely there's the inability to edit. So they present it as a picture. So that's what you've got, and you can't take it out. But even as a starter, which is what we're doing the language ones for, generate me this process map, have a look at it, then you get on your own Visio or whatever and start drawing that out. Like that already exists and has a use case for us as BAs right now. Visio doesn't have anything yet. But there was questions asked of Microsoft. Like I found one in May last year saying, "Is this coming up?" And they were like, "Watch this space." Not committing to anything, but that's a great idea. Keep an eye out. Here's a link to our roadmap. So that's even on Microsoft community chats. There's that sort of stuff going on, and that will there will be stuff in that area in time. It's just getting.
I think you're right, and I think we've hit this point now. So when was it? It must have been earlier this month, maybe mid-January, that they launched OpenAI launched the marketplace. So it's almost their app store moment now, where you have any creators can just build a version, a use case focused GPT they call it, so a subset. And that's just going to be free, available on the marketplace. And I think they're going to be able to monetize them based on usage. So you're going to see this free market explosion, I suspect, of these focused GPTs that are hyper focused on resolving a specific problem, and we'll just be tapping into those. So I think we'll see, but I think that will happen quick. And these plugins with video, people are going to quickly start solving those problems. And I think, the free market approach will allow that. I think the leading ones at the moment are AI Girlfriend seems to be the leading
Making
one.
Look like a Viking. That's one, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's
so
like the App Store at the
around.
start, right? Do you remember the App Store at the start where it was, whoopee cushion noises from your phone, or there was one where it was like a pine and you drink it and it was like the liquid would go down.
Fake X-ray.
Yeah, exactly right. So we're kind of at that stage, I think, where everyone's experimenting, but quite soon I think we'll see those.
There'll be another step change into the more serious away from those initial frippery ones.
I think it's getting used to sort of even the baseline technology, and then starting to ask the sort of questions that will push the boundaries even further. You mentioned Visio earlier. I know I tried that recently to see if I could produce a Visio diagram. Unfortunately, obviously not, and I don't know why. But to start seeing PowerPoints coming out and Word and Excel is a step in the direction. And even for those of you looking at the front screen of the BAInsights, I've used the Bing Images AI to produce the images there, which has saved me a lot of time drawing. I can tell you, that's for sure. But just as I guess is another creative outlet to be able to just find some ideas as to how things could look, what a different perspective is on it. That we can also utilize. I've certainly found some interesting views from Bing Images as an example. When you ask it for process flows of a certain situation, you certainly don't get a process flow, but what you do get is some fairly interesting visuals that you can put in the back pocket for later if you ever want to visualize a certain journey, as it were. Definitely one to look at, I would suggest, for people. For sure. I guess we've through the course of this conversation, I think we've touched on many of the questions that I had already preconceived up front in terms of practices that we might have introduced to help us utilize the technology, approaches around how we can transform ourselves to adjust to that technology. And I guess one of the other questions I had there is how might BAs approach their analysis for projects focused on GenAI and AI itself. So I think we sort of touched on that a little bit as well. But do you think there's any particular advice or techniques that you think we might want to introduce if we have a GenAI implementation that we're focused on as BAs?
I mean, I think for me, the one thing we're very conscious of is whether we're doing like that outward focus or the inward focus is the security aspects of it. Because we have to be very careful. Obviously, if you put anything you put into the, like the GPTs and things, that then becomes potential content for someone else looking for something similar. So it's like we are very conscious about putting commercially sensitive things in there and sort of saying to people, actually, at the moment, we can't give you absolute free rein to go do everything. Because of this, we need to make sure we have some guardrails in place, and that can feel a little bit constrictive, especially to some of our more creative people. But the flip side of that is, if we don't do some of that first, we could put ourselves in some really hot water and be fined an awful lot of money. Security and data security and everything has to be paramount as far as we're concerned to start with. So it's making sure, I think we're in that sort of exploratory phase where we're making sure we do it right and that we give people the right tools at the right time to be able to do that, but also encouraging people to go research, but be careful, go explore, go use these things, but please be careful about what is going in there. Because it is
that point is
serious.
absolutely right, Tammy, because I think having those guardrails, as you put it, up front at the start to just remind people that that, as you said, the information you input will become accessible for others in the future. Don't introduce personal information to it. Don't introduce sensitive information from your organisation to the tool. And there's probably some other guardrails, I'm sure, but they were
I don't know if you guys saw the thing with DPD and what somebody got their chatbot to do, and they actually got it to swear at them. I mean, originally, it wasn't hacking. It was purely by using the tool to do its own thing. And it took a little while, and then got it to write a poem about how poor DPD service was. And this was their own chatbot giving this out into the world. And it's like, that made headline news. And some of it's like, oh, that's a little bit funny. But it actually has more serious implications, for that business and what that does to them and their reputation. So that's kind of, I think, at the minute, the fine path that we're walking.
It's a balancing act, isn't it? It's trying to get you're trying to encourage people to use it, to find the use cases, find the efficiencies, but there's lots of risk. I think policies,
for all the good in the world, there is going to be nefarious people out there trying to turn it.
And I was talking about this with another group of BAs in response exactly to that DPD example, although I didn't remember the company name at the time. And one of the things is we also have to take into account that when we're thinking about our personas. So historically, we've thought about bad actors, and I absolutely did this, was, think about hackers and fraudsters, and disgruntled employees that have left, and stuff like that. They're your usual. But now we also have to think about, and I don't know whether they're really in the phrase of bad actors, but I guess so, is people who are trying to cause your system to do something so that they can post it on social media because it's funny.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's another category which I don't think historically we've really had. Because
I think it's a challenge. It's that manipulation. You've put this tool out there. They're not doing something. Like I said, it's hard to call them a bad actor because it's doing what it should be doing. They are not interfering with it. They're just manipulating maybe gaps that you've left
And it's
in
not
there.
illegal either.
And it's not illegal yet.
It's an
So it's
employee,
probably,
if it's oh, sorry.
no, sorry, Jason.
John, I was just going to say, so yeah, the way you kind of seen it there is it's okay, if it's a customer facing chatbot, okay, that's dealing with inbound booking inquiries, for example, it's an employee, essentially, and it could slip up and say the wrong thing, and you've kind of got to manage that as a digital employee almost. But yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Yeah, there's a risk there, isn't there, through people trying to force it to.
I think it's quite an interesting point, almost to end on. I'll say I use the word almost because I know we've been talking for a while on loads of interesting subtopics relating to AI and GenAI. I just wondered before we do call things to a close, if there's any other points or interesting snippets that anyone wishes to share, or as I say, snippets, tips as well.
I mean, I think as BAs, it's don't be afraid of it. Go and embrace it. Go and learn about it, like we do with any tool that we have. Go and find the good that it can do. It is there to help us. It won't replace us. Not in my lifetime, I would hope anyway. But you find out how we can improve and take the best of it. I think as BAs, as real people, we have human interaction going for us. That is going to be so hard to replicate for quite some time. The idiosyncrasies of people, a chatbot is going to struggle to get to grips with. So embrace it. Don't run from it. Go and embrace it and learn about it. Treat it like we would anything else and make the most of it, I think, is what I'd suggest to people.
Yeah, and I think further to that point, if you don't want AI to come as a huge shock to you at some point, then evolve now. So do the smaller bits. Imagine trying to, start using an iPhone now, or and jump in, and like you say about the App Store, trying to develop an app now. It's easier to kind of jump on that earlier. And we can't be the proverbial ostrich with our head in the sand, because it's not just happening, it's already here. So things like educating yourself, things like going and using stuff, obviously with caution, following people, on LinkedIn, on Instagram or whatever, that are AI specialists, that work in the industry, that are posting stuff out. Get familiar with it, get familiar with the terms. If you've got AI projects going on in your organization, put your hand up and volunteer for them. Like that's the holy grail at the moment, right? So go and get involved in those. That we as BAs, we all have the opportunity to attend conferences and webinars, and we have things like this, John. So even if people are watching this right now, right, that's part of their education, and actively think. I don't know whether we've been that educational, but actively thinking about AI and how it's going to impact you and how you can get involved. But yeah, go to talks at conferences, go to webinars, listen to what's going on in the AI world. Yeah. Hey, throw it into, ChatGPT. How is this going to change my world? And kind of learn about it that way. That'd probably be my summary to people that maybe are, I suppose, a little bit earlier on the journey of AI.
That's it. And at least with that awareness anyway, that's the first start of the journey anyway, having that awareness and then doing those other things that you mentioned. And Jason, sorry, any
yeah, I think what's really helped me recently, I think for the last sort of 6-12 months, I've been increasingly interested in the prompts, developing more complex prompts and trying to identify use cases. And I think for anyone that's at that point, what's really helped me is understanding what it's good at and what it's bad at. It's good at shallow tasks, it's good at basic things, it's good at administrative, low complex, fairly boring tasks. And I think about your role, what you do within an engagement, and try and outsource as much of that work to it and focus your energy, spend more of your time in that value adding space, the value adding task, customer facing. And I think just thinking of it as an assistant and how can it help you, and focusing on developing the prompts to do so. But yeah, and if you're not involved, get involved to some extent, have a play around with it. It's the first step.
I would agree.
I mean, ultimately, it's going to become, it's just going to become another tool in our toolkit.
That's it.
They've all grown. I think, we've all been in this game a little while, some longer than others. We didn't have everything that we've got now.
That's it.
So
And I
that, for
think
me,
the
that's all it is.
points-
It's the next tool and the next helper.
And the points you all made around, embracing it as a new tool, learning from it, adapting to it as you learn more, are advice that is definitely applicable for sure. Not only echo, but also it's all advice that we'd also apply to all other techniques that we've had presented to us over the years, and I'm sure we're embracing them and continue to do so as well. So I think the other point as well you touched on was really just learning from each other, really, and in the same way that as a business analyst, if I'm observing someone who is facilitating a session better than me, or is writing a requirement down better than I want to try and emulate the way they're doing it. In the same way, if I see people using generative AI or AI in a better way than I am, or defining the analysis for it in a better way than I am, then I'm going to try and learn from them individuals as well. I think then we'll be in a much better place. But that aside, I'm sure we could talk much longer, and I'm sure there'll be other topics on it outside this forum for sure. But thank you everybody again for your attendance. Thank you for your insight and your expertise. And I'll look forward to certainly speaking to you again, not just on this topic, but I'm sure many others relating to business analysis. So thank you again, everybody.
Thanks, John.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks,
you
John.
too.
Nice to meet everyone.